Up until a couple weeks before this movie's release, I was very middle of the road when it came to how I felt about it. It seemed as if there was an equal chance it'd be either good or bad. For me personally, it seemed to have the same number of pros and cons weighing against it. There are some movies this year that I'm already really excited for, and there are some that I'm not really looking forward to, but this one was different. It's one of the only animated movies coming out this year that I was seriously just going to wait until I saw it to have any kind of positive or negative opinion. However, shortly before the movie came out, I saw people who saw early screenings talking about how the trailers were misleading and most of the movie is 2D animated, and I actually started to get pretty excited, and for good reason. It was a nice, refreshing experience to see a mostly 2D animated movie on the big screen, but that wasn't the only thing to enjoy about the movie. The story revolves around the Krabby Patty secret formula being stolen, and naturally everyone thinks Plankton stole it. SpongeBob is the only one who genuinely believes he's innocent, so the two set out to find out who did steal it and figure out how to get it back. They discover it was stolen by a pirate named Burger Beard, played by a live-action Antonio Banderas, who is using it to start a popular restaurant chain on land, so SpongeBob and his friends go up to the surface to retrieve the formula. I will start by saying that this movie isn't as good as the first SpongeBob movie, but I won't really be making any comparisons in this review. This will just be about Sponge Out of Water itself. Besides, I don't think anyone expected this to be better than the first movie. That movie's still a classic as far as I'm concerned. As I said earlier, this movie is mostly 2D animated, and the CG stuff that's in all the trailers doesn't happen until the last third. Kind of an odd choice, but I guess CG characters on land was the best way to sell the movie, because, you know, a full-length Spongebob Squarepants movie on the big screen isn't going to bring tons of kids into the theater already. I honestly think the marketing for this movie, while not terrible and certainly effective, was a mistake, because if the audience didn't already know about what happens, it would have made the last third more funny and exciting. I feel like if I didn't know that the characters were going to be oversized CG superheroes in the climax of the film, it would have made a bigger impact on me. Still, the CG animation is well done, and the last third is by no means weak, but I still did really enjoy seeing the 2D animation of the first two-thirds of the movie. It really is nice to see 2D animation in theaters, considering how uncommon it is in Western animated films these days. There's also a bit of stop motion in here too, so it's cool to see 3 different animation styles in the same movie without any of it feeling too jarringly different. If I had to describe this movie in terms of story, I'd have to say it's kind of all over the place. When I explained the story, I just kind of went over the essentials, but I didn't even get into the stuff like Bikini Bottom basically going into apocalypse mode when the formula is stolen, all the stuff that happens to SpongeBob and Plankton in the second half of the movie, the scenes with Burger Beard in the beginning establishing his motives along with him being the one telling the story, Sandy going mad over the lack of Krabby Patties and theorizing that the burger gods are displeased. There's just so much going on in this movie. Not all of these are bad. For example, I did like the way they incorporated Burger Beard in the first half with him telling the story to some seagulls on his ship. None of that felt disjointed to me. On one hand, yeah, a movie does need stakes and it needs to be bigger than the show so it doesn't feel just like an extended episode of the show, and I'm grateful that it doesn't feel that way. I'm not saying any of these things shouldn't be in the movie, but there are some scenes where I was just thinking, why is this here? Or why is this still going on? Some of them feel pointless only for you to find out that they do come back later, but they still kind of drag on longer than they need to, and will leave you wondering when they're just going to get to the next scene. That's not to say that this movie is boring or unengaging, though. While not every single joke works, I found the humor mostly pretty funny. This feels more similar to the first 3 seasons of the show than the more recent seasons, which is definitely a good thing. And I think the best thing about this movie is the characters, which is a relief because it's what I was worried about the most. One of the worst things about the current show is that all of the characters have become so derailed, but they all feel like the way they should be in this movie, especially SpongeBob himself. I love the way he was characterized. He's still the fun-loving, optimistic guy he always was without being obnoxious to watch. Plankton's character was also done really well. He even gets some development and grows as a character, becoming something of an ally to SpongeBob and the others without being a full-on good guy. Nothing about the way he was characterized felt forced. It felt pretty natural to me. As for Patrick, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs, they're all funny and more like their original selves rather than the derailed versions from the current show. Sandy's character was kind of odd, but not terrible, and the fact that she turns into a giant land squirrel when everyone else is beefy superhero versions of themselves is pretty funny. Overall, I'd say Stephen Hillenburg was a blessing to this movie because it really does feel more like the original SpongeBob. I don't think it quite captures it perfectly, but definitely much more than the show does right now. While I did have problems with it, mostly with the story structure, it did make me realize that it's been a long time since I saw something this good from SpongeBob, and I really missed that. SpongeBob used to be a really good show. I think this is one of those movies that may surprise you, but mostly if you think you'll like it, you most likely will, and if you think you won't like it after hearing more about it than just what the trailers give you, you probably won't. And yes, this movie is pretty much meant for people that are familiar with the show. With the first movie, I think someone might enjoy it if they went in blind, but I don't think so with this movie. So if you're not at all familiar, this isn't your film. But if you are, and you want something that captures the charm and humor of the original series, you won't find absolutely everything here, but it's still pretty close enough for me to recommend it.